Okay, we're continuing with Siman Reish Daled, and we'll finish Siman Reish Daled today. Go through Sa'ifim, Vav, Zayin, Yud Aleph, and then back to Ches. Sa'if, Vav, and Zayin is if you made a sale or something just by talking, and the Lekeach already wrote his name on the thing that he's supposed to purchase, and the Tur over here adds, even if it's in a place where the minhag is not to write that, and even if he did not give any money, then he's supposed to receive a mishapara, whoever changes his mind. And if the minhag is that in this place that by writing he already becomes a kinyan, neither of them could retract, as long as the seller is the one who told the buyer to write his name, or the seller himself wrote the name, because that's already considered like a kinyan, so it's not a mishapara, it's a kinyan, and to retract a kinyan you have to have a kinyan, as we discussed in the past. But any discussion which was done only by talking and there was no writing down on the purchase or anything of the sort, then obviously you have to keep up your word. But since there was no transfer of money and there was no writing down or anything of the sort, then whoever retracts is a mechusar amane ve'ein ruach chachamim noicha heimenu. Now, what does ein ruach chachamim noicha heimenu? You have a prisha over here. The prisha tells you, and explains the shit of Rashi and Nimukei Yosef, that the Chachamim do not have nachas from the actions of somebody who does something that the Chachamim said not to do. And he tells you, go look in what I wrote in Siman Kuf Chav Zayin and Siman Shin Samach Vav. And if you look in Siman Kuf Chav Zayin, over there he discusses somebody who borrowed money from a ger, who converted together with his children, so there's no din Yerusha to his children. Over there it says, Ein Ruach Chachamim Neicha, from somebody who returns the money to his kids, to his non-kids. Ruach Chachamim Neicha, yeah. And what does it mean over there? That Chachamim are fine with what he does, and if he does not return the money, it's Chachamim are not too happy with what he did, but it's not the same as it is here, and they're not moiche. It's not completely. Chachamim Yisrael don't have the same. It's a different. It's not like as bad as it is in this one. And in Shin Samach Vav over there, it's talking about a Gazlan that wants to do tshuva and says that you're not mekabel the gzela back from him because of the derech b'fnei tshuva. And if he is mekabel, ein ruach chachamim neicha heimenu. And over there it means that there's no ruach chochma. He doesn't have ruach chochma v'chsidus in him. So basically it just tells you that each place, the Prisha tells you, ruach chachamim neicha heimenu is something which depends on the case. So what's mashma is over here, when you did damage to somebody else, of some sort of damage to somebody else, and chachamim are not happy that you did something that they shouldn't have done. When it's somebody who gives something that he doesn't have to give, then there is, okay, we're not going to be moiche against such a thing, that he's mashve, that he compares the kids of the non-kids to Yiddish kids, to Yoshim. And if somebody receives something he's not supposed to receive, then he's not acting in the ways of Chachamim and Darkei HaChasidus. So basically each place is different what Ruach Chachamim Neicha Heimenu means. So I point out, I'm going to get to it later, there's a Tzemach Tzedek, Siman Pei Beis, where the Tzemach Tzedek, which is in your book, the last tshuva of Tzemach Tzedek that's in your book, Where over there, he actually connects all the Ruach HaChon Necha and Menus into one to be able to prove a point farkert from what it says. But just pointing it out to you so you should know, stay in suspense till we get there. Now, the Darkei Moshe over here points out that the Nemukei Yosef says on this, a person who retracts, who does not follow his statement, does not do his, not follow on his words, that it says, Le'osa Maisa Yisrael, which is interesting because the words Le'osa Maisa Yisrael, that the Mechaber uses it regarding Mishapara, and not regarding Mechusrei Amana. So it seems like Nemukei Yosef looks that there is an Isur even by Mechusrei Amana, which fits with what the Alter Rebbe, that he does make an Isur out of it. I say Isur Mid'Rabbanan, but it's still an Isur. And Alter Rebbe, we have a Isur Mid'Oraisa, Isur Mid'Rabbanan. We already discussed it. Now, if you look and smell over here, Sifkat Yud Beis, the way he presents it, it seems like there might even be an Isur Mid'Oraisa by Mechusrei Amana. Not like the Alter Rebbe, that's mashma that it's only Mid'Rabbanan. Now, I'm jumping to Sif Yud Aleph because to understand the whole picture of this, it's important to see what's in Sif Yud Aleph, where the Ramah quotes the Mechaber over here and then adds what the Tur writes on this din. And what the Tur writes on this din, which the Mechaber obviously didn't bring because the Mechaber doesn't hold of it. What is that over there? The Ramah over there brings what the Mechaber says, and he adds, that's what the Tur says. That if it's in one shar, that means the same shar that was there before, then the same price, nothing changed in the value, then and he retracts his Mechusrei Amana. If he didn't, if it's trei tare, if it's if that means that the price changed, then he is Mechusrei Amana. And the Ramah concludes, V'yashoimrim, da'afilu b'trei tare asur lachzor, even in two sha'arim, even if the price changes, you're not allowed to be chayzer. V'im chazar b'yishrim Mechusrei Amana, and if he was chayzer, if he does change, either of them change it. That means if the seller decides he doesn't want to go through with the sale because the price now is worth more, or this is to deliver something. Not. And if he changes his, and even in trei tare is also Mechusrei Amana, which is the shitta of the Beis Yosef. And the Ramah concludes, V'chein nire ikar. The halacha is like that shitta. Now, what does the Tur say on this? We have a Tur. In the Tur, right before Sif Zayin, the Tur writes in the name of the Rosh that you only have to mekabel mishapara if you change, if you retract after, means obviously after money is transferred, when mishum yoikro v'zula, when you want to change the value. Yeah, it means the seller wants more or the buyer wants to pay less, either or, but not because the shar has changed. But if he retracts because of hefsid, which we discussed in the past, last year, if he changes his mind because he's worried that he's going to have a loss, he doesn't have to receive mishapara. And then when you go to the end of what's marked as Sif Zayin in the Tur, he says in the name of the Baal HaMoed, the Razah, Hani milu b'chat tara, v'b'trei tara enze mechusrei amana. It's what the Ramah brings in Sif Yud Aleph. It's only if it's you want to change the price, but not if the value went up or the value went down, and then the buyer wants to pay less because the value went down, and the seller wants to charge more because the value went up. There's no mechusrei amana. Yeah, that is what the Tur brings in the name of the Baal HaMoed. Now, what's the logic behind it? It's very simple. Why would you receive a mishapara or mechusrei amana, whichever one you want to look at, because I'm going to see if there's a difference between them or not regarding trei tare chatara, is because you look at the person's thought process. And we're going to soon see it also, Beis Yaakov discusses it like that. That means when a person makes a decision to buy a certain product for a certain price, and then he changes his mind, so he is mechusar amana, because he changed his mind. When a person decides to buy something at a certain price, but then the value went down, he didn't change his mind. The circumstances changed. So therefore, according to the Baal HaMoed, you can't hold a guy liable for circumstances that are not in his control. Similar to chashash hefsed. Why by chashash hefsed or by hefsed mamish you could change your mind according to most opinions, by chashash hefsed, because you didn't change your mind. Mechusrei amana means, or mishapara is, I didn't I didn't keep to my word. Mechusrei amana, I'm not a trustworthy person. Why? Because I didn't keep to my word. But if it's, I want to keep to my word, I wanted to keep to my word when I did it, but the circumstances changed and it's different. The Beis Yosef actually points out something interesting, that this day of the Baal HaMoed, it's mashma, the Rosh paskins the same way. So just an interesting point why the Tur didn't bring it in the name of his father. I don't know, but just pointing it out over there. The Tur brings the Trei Tares, there's no, when the shar changes, when the value changes, then there's no Mishapara, there's no Mechusar Amana, he brings it in the Baal HaMoed. The Beis Yosef says it seems like the Rosh holds the same way. The Beis Yosef also brings that the Ran understood the Rashba like that. He brings the Ran in the name of the Rashba that it's Asur in Trei Tarei. And then it means the Beis Yosef goes through a whole list of people that say that it's Asur. He brings the Mukhi Yosef and the Ravid. And then the Mukhi Yosef, the way he explains the Ran. And the Magid Mishneh. And the Rashba, and the Mashmos of Taisvis, and Rabbeinu Yerucham, all these people, that's pretty clear that they all hold that it's Asur.
Is that only market price, or can it be, I found someone else to buy it at a much?
We'll get to that later. This is our later, in Piskei HaMishpat, he goes through all those scenarios, and he brings Makaitis for it. I'm not going to get into it right now, but from the Alter Rebbe, it's pretty clear that it's Asur. If you decide to sell to somebody at a certain price, and then the guy wants to pay you more, then you're not allowed to take it. From the same guy. Allah has come from somebody else. Sadir Shamayim, he says. No. Alter Rebbe doesn't mention Trei Tarei. But the way the Alter Rebbe paints this Isur, it seems like he's pretty extreme, that it's Asur in any variation, especially if you go down the levels, Medina, Midachsidis, Yirei Shamayim, then you definitely are in trouble to do any of these kinds of things. Now, the Bach in Sifkot Yud Aleph says that asks on the Tur why in the beginning you mentioned the din of Mechusrei Amana without specifying anything, and only in the end he brings the Baal HaMoed, and it's mashma from the beginning that even Betrei Tarei is also Asur. The Bach says that it looks like the halacha should be like Rashi and Taisvis, that they are Oiser. And he says that Beis Yosef also brings all the people who are Oiser. And he says that Rama also paskins la halacha like the Oiserim. But he says, from the Yerushalmi, it's mashma that it's mutter and Trei Tarei. Therefore, the Bach concludes, Tzarich Iyun la halacha. The Shach tells you go look at the Bach. If you look at the Shach doesn't look at the Bach. The Shach says that go look at the Bach. The Bach is Mesupik. Now, the fact that the Shach tells you that obviously means that he looks like the Bach, or at least he doesn't paskin. Now, the Nesivis, who usually paskins like the Smeh, against the Shach, in Chidushim Sifkot and Yud, which is on Sif Yud Aleph, he brings the Shach. In Sifkot and Vav, which is on this Sif Zayin, he only brings the first half of the Smeh, and not the Achra of the Smeh, that it's Asur also Betrei Tarei. And it seems like in the Siv is also mistapik, basically, that you have a Safek, the Halacha. Now, Nesivis and Sifkot and Yud Aleph, and Sifkot and Yud and Sifkot and Vav. Sifkot and Vav, he just quotes half of the Smeh. And in Sifkot and Yud, he quotes the Shach. Now, what does it mean as a Sofik lahaloche? Now, we're talking about an Isur D'Rabbanan. Chusrei Amon. Unless you're going to follow the mashmos of the Sman and Muki Yosef, which could be to the Raisa, but if it's D'Rabbanan, and you have a machlokes, a Sofik D'Rabbanan l'kulo, essentially means that the Shach and the Bach and the Nesivis will paskin, then Trei Tarei, it's mutter. Why is it mutter? It's Sofik. Sofik and the D'Rabbanan is mutter. Now let's go into different scenarios where this plays out in the Poskim, interesting discussions, and then from there we're going to see how more interesting details about the thing. You have Erech Shai, Sifkot and Hey. What is he talking about? A person wanted to agreed to sell some of his possessions for a certain price. Why? Because he wanted to buy a pot to make mashke. Now, the pots to make mashke are different than the regular pots because it's a still. It's a pot which has a big tube on top of it that the alcohol evaporates, so it's a custom-made pot. It has to be pressurized so it doesn't escape. It's an expensive pot. He agreed he's going to sell all of these things so he could buy this still, to distill mashke. And why? It's mashma that he wanted to follow what his father does. His father was also a distiller, so he wanted to do the same. What happened in between? His father died, and he yashed in his father's distillery. So now he doesn't need the pot anymore. So he doesn't need the pot anymore, he doesn't have to sell his things anymore. He already agreed to sell. So he wants to change his mind. And he brings the Chasam Sofer, he says the Chasam Sofer, and Mispat and Siman Kuf Beis. And that's brought in the Divrei Geonim, Klal Tezayin Oisches, that you don't even have to receive a Mishapara. Why? Because it's like Trei Tarei. It's a change of circumstances. It's not that there's a value change. It's like Trei Tarei in the Ramah. Chasam Sofer. Siman Kuf Beis. Says you don't even have to receive Mishapara because it's like Trei Tarei. Comes Erech Shai. Well, first of all, it seems like the Chasam Sofer Pasuk is like the Baal HaMoed. Comes Erech Shai with a big question. He says, what?
Money changed hands already, so it was like Mishapara that was required? Would have
been Mishapara. Comes Erech Shai and says, I don't understand what the Chasam Sofer is saying. The Ramah wrote it regarding Mechusrei Amana, not regarding Mishapara. Since when does the Trei Tarei apply to Mishapara also? So he says, Chasam Sofer can't prove that you can't say this because of that reason, because of the Mishapara. Elamai, there's another reason the Chasam Sofer gives, not because that reason is good. But you don't tell me that it's because Mishapara has the same din as Mechusrei Amana, that by Trei Tarei you miss out on the Mishapara. And what's the reason? Is that the Chasam Sofer says that when we have a clear umdana of a moicher, seller that wanted to sell, and he didn't need the money for it, so there was no full Gemirus Das over there. So then there's no Mishapara if he retracts. That's the sword of the Chasam Sofer. No, it helps for actual kinyan. It helps for even receiving money. He says because the guy should have known. The guy doesn't really need the money. He's selling whatever, So it's not such there's no smichus das.
Someone who says going to sell,
Yeah. Yeah. Now, what's the sword of the Chasam Sofer? Very simple. What's Trei Tarei? The idea of Trei Tarei is if somebody wants to buy or sell at a specific price, and he actually had in mind to do it, and he was serious about it, but the circumstances changed, so the original Gmirus Das, the original agreement, doesn't exist anymore, and therefore there's no Isser, because you're not retracting what you agreed to. Why? Because you don't cause somebody, like I explained before, you don't cause somebody a hefsed. You don't cause you don't use this din of Mishapara or Mechusrei Amana to force somebody to absorb a loss. Whether it is the seller to absorb a lower price or the buyer to pay a higher price than what it's worth. And therefore, in any case of change of circumstances, the same din applies.
If a buyer loses all the money and
no longer afford it. That's still the same with it?
If it's according to some shit, this will still be mechus reiman. According to other shit, it's no. Because when I said I'm going to buy it, I had this amount of money in the bank account, and something happened and I lost it. So it could be noinus.
If that's an external factor.
Could be noinus. It's an external factor. Not if he spent it on something else. The Beis Yaakov over here brings an interesting trumas keris sif beis, which he says interesting chkira. What happened if two people agreed and there was money exchanged, but the thing wasn't exchanged yet, and then there wasn't nenas. The actual chayfetz was nenas, and therefore you wouldn't be supposed to get a mishapara. But what happened before the oinus happened? The person already retracted. So now on Sunday they agreed to do the deal, and they transferred money. On Tuesday, he changed his mind. So now he's supposed to get a mishapara. And we already went through it last time, there's a whole discussion if mishapara means that is it like a threat that you should fulfill what you're supposed to do, or a mishapara is just something that's on you because you did something wrong, but let's leave that aside for a second, and based on that will be a decision over here. But Lamaise now became an oinus on Thursday. So even if he wanted to be mekayim the mekach now, there's no chance. Do you still get the mishapara or not? And he says, the Trumas Akeri says, that the mishapara still remains. Why? Because the mishapara landed on your head on Tuesday. The fact that on Thursday things changed doesn't take off from you the mishapara. And he proves it from the Gemara. And the Beis Yaakov says that doesn't make sense to say such a thing. The Beis Yaakov says, I don't agree with the Trumas Akeri. And the mishapara, he doesn't explain it, but based on what he explained before, basically the mishapara is something which is connected to the sale. Now the sale cannot be fulfilled, so the mishapara falls by the wayside. That's what he points out. So the mishapara is not like a knas that's put on you. It's a knas for something for you to do something. Because let's think about it logically. If somebody is supposed to receive a mishapara on Tuesday, and then on Thursday he changes his mind back and he wants to do it, so obviously he's not going to get the mishapara, right? So that means the mishapara is only there to bring you to do the sale. So you don't get a mishapara and end up without the possibility of buying it. A mishapara without a return policy, that doesn't work. So that's what the Beis Yaakov says. Beis Yaakov continues and says that it's pretty clear that the shach paskins, the second point of the Beis Yaakov, the shach paskins like the bach, that the shach paskins like the first shita, that there's no mishapara, no mechus ramana by treitare. Then he brings from the besamim roish, siman shin tes, which we all know besamim roish is already, it's pretty clear today that it's not a real sefer. Parts might be real, parts are fake. But at least in those days, it wasn't sure that they didn't look at it that way. Besamim roish is supposedly from the has chuvas from the Rishonim and from the Goinim, from the Rosh. Yeah, but it was collected by Shaul Berlin, and there's a lot of things in there which are some things over there which are clearly heretical. You know, like you're allowed to, in certain countries, you're allowed to drink stam yenam and stuff like that. Therefore the Rabbanim said, If you travel, yeah, but a bunch of kfirah that was stuck into there in between. So some people say the whole book is a fraud. And some people say certain parts are fraud and certain parts are real, and he just stuck in his kfirah in between the good ones.
Why use it at all? Why use it at all?
Because if it has some good things in there, that maybe they were original from the Goinim. Maybe he did have exception.
He quotes and he adds his own stuff too? He quotes and he adds his own stuff?
He has different shuvas. There's also a beer. Forget about the beer. Put the beer aside. Yeah, so some people take it like as things that make sense. It could be they come from some original sources. So he quotes the name of Rabbeinu Simcha. Could be it's from Rabbeinu Simcha, could be it's from his own. That there's no Isser. But he adds that it's only up to a 6, like Dinei Oino. Which is interesting. That Tzemach Tzedek and Siman Pei Beis also connects it to Dinei Oino. And he says up to a fifth, up to Atshtus, just like by Oino, then you shouldn't be Chayzer even by Nishtane Hashar. Now, what's the Beis Yaakov over here trying to bring out by connecting these two together? That's what it looks like. That the din of Mishapara is talui in the time when the obligation of Mishapara fell on your head, and since you changed your mind after the shar was changed, then there is no Mishapara, no Mechusar Amona. Yeah, that's what it seems like from the Beis Yaakov. But if you changed your mind and then the shar was changed, then according to the Terumas HaKeri, you might still be liable for, it's still asur to do it. You still get a mechusar amona. That's what it seems like the Beis Yaakov is trying to bring. And the Beis Yaakov doesn't fit us this maskana, but it seems like the Beis Yaakov is trying to tell you that if nishtane ashar, after you changed your mind, then there will be a discussion if you still have the mechusar amona or not. Then the Knesset Agdeila, Hagoyes Atur Sifkot and Tezvav says that the din of Mechusar Amona is mashma that there's no difference whether in the din of Mechusar Amona, whether it's because of Hefsid or because of Yoikra Vizula, whatever it is. It's not like Mishapara that we start making the differentiations, but when it comes to Mechusar Amona, whether you change your mind because you want to change your mind, or you change your mind because of Chashash Hefsid or Treitare or whatever it is, you're always a Mechusar Amona. And he says, from the Smets, mashma, that there's no mechusar amona when it's a chashash hefsid, and that's how he finishes his statement. He says, that's from the Smas, mashma, not like that. Even though from the Lashon of the Tur, Beis Yosef it's mashma, yes, like that. And Sifkot and Tazayin, the Knesset Agdeila says that mechusar, a very important klal, that the din of mechusar amona is only in something which is bala olam, and only something which yesh by mamish, bala olam, that if you would have done a kinyan at this moment, you would have received it. But something which you cannot do a kinyan now on it, then there's no mechusar amona. Mechusar amona is that you didn't fulfill what you were supposed to do. What were you supposed to do? Acquire the object. But how can you acquire the object? With a kinyan. Elamai, we say you didn't do the kinyan in the beginning, so now you're mechusar amona. But something which you cannot do a kinyan, the mechusar amona doesn't apply. That's the svara of the Knesset Agdeila in Hagoyes Atur Ois Tazayin. And he brings it from the Rosh. Now, hold this in your mind, because we're going to get to it soon, because you could use this logic exactly fakert. That mechusar amona and maybe even Mishapara would apply in something which you cannot make a kinyan, because the deal is sealed at that moment. Right? Could be that you could do it. An agreement to do something. Maybe it's sealed at that moment, when you made the agreement, and you followed up with it. Something which is Zolei Bala. Anyways, we'll get back to it soon, because it's interesting in Gesmeisha about unionizing, which uses the svara exactly fakert. Now, in Ois Yud Zayin, the Knesset Agdeila, Agostur Ois Yud Zayin says that it says Ein Akin Nigman B'Dvarim, etc. There's still an Isur, which we know. We know there's an Isur, of by Mechusar Amona. We don't know if it's Isur D'Oraisa, Isur D'Rabbanan, according to Alter Rebbe, it's Isur D'Rabbanan, but it's a Mechusar Amona. And he adds, Bezdin has to do whatever they can to prevent the guy from retracting from his oral statements, even if there's no money transfer. Don't let a guy become a chosar amona. How do you stop him? By making him an avari and telling him he's an avari and he's a crook, he's a rasha. But you can't force him through a nidui. You can't take it a step further. You can't do kfiyah that he has to fulfill what he said he's going to do.
Who says the
The Knesset Agdeila says it, and he says in the name of the Mordechai the Marik in Ranach. And he adds another interesting thing. Just the same dinim, he says, there's differences between mishapara and mechusar amana, right? Sometimes you mechusar amana, sometimes you mishapara. But there's no difference how you apply it to the person, which means by mishapara we have a whole discussion. If the shliach tzibur announces it in shul, the bach goes through it. We also have it in Shulchan Aruch over here. If the dayan announces it to him, if the whole bezdin says it to him, he says whatever applies to the announcements, to the advertising of mishapara applies to mechusar amana also. If he's a mechusar amana, the bezdin will tell him, or the dayan will tell him, or the gabbai will announce it, the shliach tzibur, whatever it is. One of them, the same din, the same discussion that applies to how to brand somebody a mishapara applies to how to brand somebody a mechusar amana. He says the only difference between mechusar amana and mishapara is the type of curse, not the application of it. That's how he says. And he brings the name of the Maram Mintz. Now let's go to the Tzemach Tzedek. Choshen Mishpat Siman Pei Beis. Tzemach Tzedek, very interesting Tzemach Tzedek. Siman Pei Beis, it's page 179. It's a long tshuva, which I mentioned already previously in two shiurim, and because I dealt with other elements of it. Now I'm going to deal with the first 5 oisios of Siman Pei Beis in short. Starts in Ois Aleph, and he says that being that it only says Ein Ruach Chachamim Noicha Imenu, yeah, in the case of somebody who there's no money exchange, but there was just a talk between them. Mashma, there's no isur whatsoever in mechusar amana. Not like the mashma of Alter Rebbe. And he goes through all the other places where it says Ruach Chachamim Noicha Imenu, Ein Ruach Chachamim Noicha Imenu, which the Prisha mentions also. Then he says maybe there's a little bit of an isur. And he says, why? Because he goes into the whole discussion of matana mu'etes. There is somewhat of an isur. Maybe there's an isur over there. Samcha daite. And he says, maybe by a matana g'dayla there's no samcha daite, but by a business deal, when I have a conversation with you and we set on a price, I'm going to sell you 1,000 pieces of something, there was only a talk, but there was already an agreement, there was no transfer of money, but it's something that, it's not a matana, it's something which we talked about and we agreed to, and I as a seller was already samech das on it. And the meicher will still have a kveida, or the seller or the buyer, one of them will have a kveida if the sale doesn't go through. Maybe there'll still be somewhat of an isur in it. Comes to Tzemach Tzedek and says, this whole mechusar amana by a sale only applies if the buyer gave a mashkin, something. What does it mean? Lo nasan damim doesn't mean that it was just talk. It means that there was some kind of mashkin, something given for the fulfillment of this deal. But if there was nothing given, it was just talk, then there's no smichus das of the seller. If there's no smichus das of the seller, he has no right to be makpid. If he's no right to be makpid, then there's no isur if he retracts his mind. And maybe there's not even mechusar amana. Only if there was a transfer of some of the schayra without any payment, or there was a mashkin given, then we could say there's mechusar amana. And he expands on it more in Ois Beis.
This is different from a down payment.
Not a down payment. Mashkin is not a down payment.
But by mashkin you have a mishapara.
No. What? Only if the mashkin was towards the payment of it. Then he goes into a side thing about the nishtana asha, trei tare. And he says, it's mashma from the Yerushalmi, which we already know this Yerushalmi because the Bach mentions it, that by nishtana asha you could change your mind, unlike the Baal HaMoed. And the Baal HaMoed explains the Talmud Bavli like that, not like the Rashba and all the other people. Which means if you want to match up the Yerushalmi and the Bavli, you have to follow the Baal HaMoed. And not like the Rashba and all the other people who are Machmer. And he goes, the Tzemach Tzedek continues, as Gimel is doubt about this topic. And always say Tzemach Tzedek says that even though we have all these proofs that there's not even mechusar amana in these kinds of when it changes in trei tare. Yeah? The Beis Yosef brings all the days which are machmir, doesn't bring the days which are mekel. But against the Beis Yosef, you have the Bala Itur and the Bala Moir and the Mashmos of the Rosh. He's Mashmos of the Rosh, which we know that the Beis Yosef points out the Mashmos of the Rosh. And the Rash. And he tells you, go look in the Shach over here. He lists them together with all the people that seems to be mekel, which means that Tzemach Tzedek also understands the Shach to be mekel. And he continues and he says there's a difference between a sale without money, where even a big sale when there's no mechusar amana without smichus das, to matana muetas where there is smichus das, and then he goes into the topic of the question that was at hand. And it seems pretty clear from the first 5 oisias, and that Tzemach Tzedek doesn't go back to the topic too much, that Tzemach Tzedek is noite to be mekel in terei tarei, and even more so, might redefine the whole mechusar amana, that mechusar amana is only when there is smichus das, which is a big chiddush, because the mechus, we thought that smichus das only goes into mishapara. Over here it goes into mechusar amana. Now we're going to get to the Igros Moshe about unionizing. Very interesting Igros Moshe. Huh?
According to Tzemach Tzedek, according to what it sounds like, if there's a mashkin
that made a smichus das, or the seller or the buyer took some of the schayre already, then yeah.
Then he doesn't go like that much. Even if the price goes down, he's still yours.
That's what it seems like, yeah. The Igros Moshe, Choshen, Mishpat, Chelek Aleph, Siman, and Ches deals with the question of unionizing. There was a whole discussion in the 50s, the 40s, 50s. There was a union of shachtim. And once in a while they would go on strikes, because they were together with the slaughterhouse workers. There was goyim involved. And over there, the Igros Moshe begins by saying there's no issur whatsoever in joining a union. There's no issur in participating in strikes. There's no issur in any of these things, because it's all for the benefit of the workers. And if somebody joins a union and agrees with and takes upon himself the conditions of the union, they fight for him. Even though there's no kinyan whatsoever, and it's only an agreement between the parties, he has to fulfill the rules of the union. And he has a din of mechusar amana if he doesn't. Choshen, Mishpat, Chelek Aleph, Siman, and Ches, Igros Moshe. He says the only thing you're not allowed to do is something which is asur al pi Torah. For example, beating up people who don't participate in the strike. That's what he says. He says an example. That's you're not allowed to do. But knossos and anything else which is done, you're allowed to. And it seems from the Igros Moshe 3 interesting nekudas. Number 1, so even something which you cannot do a kinyan on, still mechusar amana, if you don't fulfill your words. Number 2, joining a union even with goyim is mutter. He writes it clearly. And number 3, if you're part of a union and you decide to bust the strike and work during a strike, then you're over on mechusar amana. There's a book, Piskei HaMishpat. A new book, looks like Piskei Tshuva. And over here it brings some interesting chidushim that he has. Some things he has makeres for, some things he doesn't, but they all make sense. I just brought you some of the nekudas that he has. Number 1 thing. If somebody walks into a store and wants to buy a product, he agreed on the price with the seller. And then he takes out his wallet and he sees he doesn't have enough cash. The guy only takes cash. And he tells him, I'm going home, I'll go get some more cash and I'll come back. Then another person walks into the store and wants to buy the product. So he says, if the seller doesn't know the buyer, or didn't promise the buyer that he's going to wait for him, so he's not soymech das. The guy says, I'm going to walk out, I'll get some cash and I'll come back home, I'll come back over. So that's not enough of there's no mechusar amana over here. Says, but if you know the buyer and you know that he's reliable, and you know that when he tells you he's going to come back and buy it, he's going to come back and buy it. Or you told him, I'm going to hold it for you, lay away. Then there's mechusar amana if you sell it to somebody else. Then on Seif Yud Aleph he says regarding the whole terei tarei situation, he says that a lot of achronim are machriya to be mekel in the whole din of terei tarei, and he brings a whole list of achronim. The Piskei HaMishpat, this one. New book. You have it in Kailo. And he brings a Shevet HaLevi, Chelik Dalet Siman Reish Vav, who is medayik from the Chasam Sofer that I quoted to you earlier, that being that this Isur is only the Rabbanon, you could be makel in it because of a machlekes. And he also explains the same thing I told you before, that it's the Trei Tare is not only by Nishtane Hashar, by when the price of the market price changed, but it's in any other form of agreement that's based on something and the circumstances change, and he gives you a whole list of examples. For example, you hired workers to do a certain job, but the job is not needed anymore. Or you found workers which will do the same thing for a cheaper price. That's Nishtane Hashar. Or you found a more professional workers which will do it for the same price. And he uses one of the examples he brings. You hired a sefer, you spoke to a sefer to write tefillin for you, and then you found a sefer who was better. Or you you decided you're going to go into business with somebody, but you didn't sign, you just talked about it. And then you found a better shutuf. Brings you more money to the business. You went to go buy medicine, and you said you're going to go buy medicine. You decided on the medicine. And by the time you got around to picking it up or to buying it, you got better already, so you don't need it anymore. You wanted to buy clothing for an event, and then the event got canceled. And a bunch of other examples, and he brings a Mekaydes for all of them. You could look at them. He brings from Tshuvas, the Tshuvas that discuss each one of them. When there's no money given, just to talk. Once there's money given, there's a mishapara.
No, but I'm saying, like, let's say, I don't know, I told someone to be your chavrusa, and like, that.
So he goes into a discussion if that goes into matana, into the din of matana mu'etas, matana meruba. Now he says if he mentions if you're going to tell somebody you're going to learn with him, and then is that a category of matana mu'etas, matana meruba? If it's a long term or short term. Same thing if somebody commits he's going to be a rabbi in a shul, and then he realizes what it entails and he changes his mind. Is that considered matana meruba? But if a guy says he's going to come to give a shir in shul, if a guy's going to come says he's going to come give a shir in shul, one shir on Shabbos, and there's some chadaita on them, it's matana mu'etas. If you say you commit, you commit. There's nothing you talked. Someone asked you, could you come speak Shabbos between Mincha and Ma'ariv in the summer when there's a long time? You give a shir, one shir. And then, or here's an example, I tell somebody, I make a plan with somebody, he's going to come give a shir in Kail. And he's a local, doesn't have to do anything. And then he changes his mind, backs out on me. So I'm sitting over here waiting, he doesn't show up. That's the matana mu'etas, it's mechusar amana. Now, from the Alter Rebbe, some of these you could be medayik, maybe that you should follow through with them. From the Tzemach Tzedek you could be medayik, maybe you don't have to follow through. The Ten Chacham V'Yach Kamayit, you'll go through, you'll decide each case how it fits. Doesn't bring Trei Tare Bichlal. So you could say, like the understanding of the Ramah and the Beis Yosef, that since the Ramah, the Beis Yosef didn't even mention it, the Mechaber didn't even mention it, so there's no difference between Trei Tare and Chat Tare.
It doesn't pass like the Ramah.
Huh?
It won't be passing like
The Ramah himself paskins like the Mechaber. He brings the opinion of Trei Tare, and then he says, Yesh Chalkim, brings the Beis Yosef, and says, V'chen Yireh L'Ikar.
So why would you say that the author doesn't know that's not told us?
Doesn't mention it.
No, that's the reason he doesn't know the difference.
Yeah, but L'maisa, you have to say, but Tzemach Tzedek clearly holds for Keret, so you have to say, okay, you want to make a legacy in the Pei-Beis. It's pretty clear that the Tzemach Tzedek goes through the whole thing and is mekel. And Ois Hayes. The last Tshuva over there, yeah. And it's also in Yeridea Siman, what is it, Shimon Hay? Which one did I tell you? In the Shimon Hay, that's the same Tshuva. One is two versions of the same Tshuva. Now, there's an interesting Mishnah Halachas, Chelik Yud Beis Siman Shin Ayin Tes, where he says something that we all know, that the din of Mechus Ramon doesn't apply by a goy, right? And he says, goyim change their mind back and forth also. However, he says, if it's a Chil Hashem, you have to be Mekayim your words even by a goy. Shevet HaLevi, and not Shevet HaLevi, Mishnah Halachas, Chelik Yud Beis Siman Shin Ayin Tes. Sif Ches. Let's move on to Sif Ches. Hopefully we'll have some time to finish it. I have to leave soon. Someone tells his friend, this is the matana mu'etas, matana meruba. Someone tells his friend, I'm going to give you a small gift. And he didn't give it to him. Mechusar amana. Why? Because the mekabel samcha daitai on the noisen, the one who's supposed to receive the gift, knows it's a small thing, he's probably going to give it to me. He's for sure going to give it to me. Samcha daitai. He relied on him. And therefore, if you don't do it, you're mechusar amana. But if it's a big present, then the guy knows, the guy tells him, I'm going to give you a car, then as a present, then he knows until I don't see the car in my driveway, with a transfer of title, lav dafka, I'm not saying das, that I'm not, I'm not going to have to go to the airport, I'm not going to not order a taxi because I'm expecting the car to show up. The Alter Rebbe brings this in Sif Dal, and right away adds that this is only talking about to a rich guy. That you promised the matana mu'etas to a rich guy, and the matana meruba, no. But to a ani, even if you tell him you're going to give him matana meruba, he's expecting it, he's relying on it, and therefore, mid apidin, you're not allowed to change your mind, because it is a neder. This is not written in Mispat here. It's actually written in Yeridea, Siman Reish Nun Ches, Seif Yud Beis. Well, the Mechaber says, Omar litin lechavere matane, doesn't say meruba or moetas, yeah? Im hu ani, have kenoide litzdake ve'osur lachzer boy. Doesn't tell you if it's matana meruba, matana moetas, it becomes a neder, like tzedakah, and you cannot retract. Because you say you're going to give. Because you say you're going to give, it becomes a neder. Yeah, it's not the smichas das, no, because you say you're going to give. That's what's mashma from the Shemachaber over there. Pischet Shuva over there, Sefkat Yud Gimel in Yeridea, brings from the Knesset Agdela, Choshen Mishpat סימן Kuf Chaf Hei, Hagoy Satur Ois Chaf Gimel. The same thing applies if the person who's supposed to, you tell a ben Torah that you're going to give him a matana. Why? Because the mitzvah Eitz Chaim Hi Lamachzikim Bo. And therefore, once you say to Ben Torah you're going to give him something, whether it is meruba or moetas, doesn't say meruba moetas, this is matana, then you cannot change your mind anymore. He brings the Shus Yaakov who disagrees with the Knesset Agdela, Chelek Beis and Kuf Nun Tes. The Knesset and the Shus Yaakov says that if the person is an ani, Talmid Chacham is not an ani, then the same, there's no neder over there. Who is an ani? Yeah, we all know there's a simulation of Gimel in Yeridea. Sif Aleph gives you the whole thing, what you could have, what you can't have in the beginning, but then the Mechaber right away in Sif Beis says all these klalim were in time of the Gemara. But today you can take tzedakah unless you have a keren, something which you have which generates profits that you could live off them. And the Mechaber says in Sifit Beis, the Yeshayim, he says v'divrei ta'am heim. Maybe paskins like that. And the Mechaber says it. What? Have enough money to survive for a year. Means what's so we're going to get to it in a second. The Imri Yaakov over here says, the Imri Yaakov, which is a beer, you have it in your book, the beer in Alter Rebbe over here in Dibur HaMaschil Le'ani, says that today in developed countries, when the government gives a set amount of money, if it covers your basic expenses, then tzarich if you could accept tzedakah or not. And his maskana is that he can't be received tzedakah. He brings from the book Tzedakah U'Mishpat, which is Hilchas Tzedakah, to Bloi, who wrote Pischei Choshen, that somebody who has a steady income cannot take money from tzedakah if the steady income covers his expenses. When could you take? He says if there's unexpected expenses, you have a chasna, you have something that came up, you have these kinds of things, then even somebody who usually throughout the year does not receive tzedakah basically goes on a when you need, you could take, but you can't. There's not somebody who always on tzedakah. He says that what it means in Shulchan Aruch, that you should keren and mispanas marevach doesn't mean that you have to own a house which generates profits. Until you don't own a investment house, you could take tzedakah. No, it's not what it means. It means that if you have a steady income, you cannot take tzedakah if it covers your expenses. Someone wants to give you, you could. You can't be mispanas tzedakah. No, if it's dinim in tzedakah, someone wants to give you a present, it's something else. Now, the Knesset Agdel over here, let's go back to the whole Matana Moetas, Matana Meruba thing. If you Nekudas in the Knesset Agdela goes to Tur Ois Chav Beis. Right away points out regarding Matana, he says, what I told you about earlier, about Mechusrei Amana, that it depends if it's a Davar Shaloi Bala Olam, then there's no Mechusrei Amana, applies over here also. Yeah, l'chayra. And he says no, but from the Chuvas Maram Rottenburg, which the Mardechai brings, and the Marik brings, and the Beis Yosef brings in Yeridea, it's mashma that by a matane, even if it's you tell a davar shloi b'lo'ilam, there's still a din of mechusar amana. And he Knesset says, and it makes no sense to me. But is there such a thing or not? So you look in the Alter Rebbe in Sif Daled. Not in the actual Sif Daled, but in the footnote Lamed Beis, where they have over there what the Alter Rebbe wrote, the Mekayris, and then it's like the other font. And then the Alter Rebbe sometimes writes little things after the footnotes. And he says, look in the Smeh, in Siman Reish Mem Gimel, Sifkat and Vav, in the name of the Mardechai, regarding a Matane, that it becomes like a neder only if it's biyodai when you said it. So if you say on something davar shalei bala, something davar shalei bala wasn't in your hand, then the neder wasn't chal. So therefore, if you said you're going to give something and you didn't have it, the smeh brings in, the hagoy inside the smeh brings in the Mardechai that it doesn't apply. And the Alter Rebbe says, "V'ishtamitze ma shekasav al zeh Beis Yosef v'yeridei Siman Reish Ches." Surprisingly, the Smeh missed what the Beis Yosef himself writes in Siman Reish Ches. What does the Beis Yosef say in Reish Ches in Hilchos Tzedakah? That by a neder, you're mischayev to give, even if you didn't have it in your hands yet. And the Alter Rebbe says, and that's why the Shach tells you to look in the Rif. That the Rif says that the neder applies even if you don't have it in your hands. And he says, and the Alter Rebbe says, and that's why you should look also in the Mukhi Yosef, which Paskin is the same. So it seems pretty clear that the Alter Rebbe disagrees with the Smeh. That even if, when you say you're going to give something, even if it's not in your hands, once you have that neder element over there, you cannot change your mind. Elamai, you could start arguing that since it's only about a neder, it obviously only applies by matana to a ani, not by every matana. That means if it falls in the category of neder, then you can't, then there's davar shloi bala olam. You could still, eina biyada, you still have to fulfill. But if it's regarding a matana moetas to an ashir, where the only din is not mitzad neder, but mitzad samcha daitoi, then you maybe not have to give it, like the Agoy Satur, like the Knesset Agdela. The Mata Shimon, who was the son of the grandson of the Knesset Agdela, and Agoy's Beis Yosef Sifkat Mechafalef over here, brings what his Knesset Agdela writes, that the Knesset Agdela says that Eina Biyada, you don't have to give it. Not Eina Biyada, if it's by Matana Moetas, if it's Davar Shloi B'Olam or Davar She'eina B'Olam, then you don't have to, there's no Chosar Amana. And he says, no, the Rashba disagrees. But he brings which Rashba? The Rashba, but the Ani. So the Chayra, the same thing would also, the same Chiluk would also apply as before. Let's go back to the Knesset Agdela. Yeah. Then like that's another Mekar for the Alter Rebbe, yeah. The Knesset Agdela and the Goyes Beis Yosef Ois Yud brings from the Yerushalmi that it's mashma that in a matana meruba, even if you said it to ani, you could change your mind. But he brings from the, not like the mashmos of the Mechaber in Yeridea, not like the Alter Rebbe writes clearly. But he right away brings from the tshuva of the Rash, son of the Rashbats, and the same thing is in the Maram al Shech Siman Kuf Chof Aleph, that by Ani, whether it's a Matana Moedas or Matana Meruba, there's no difference, even without a kinyan, it becomes like a neder, and you cannot change your mind. And the Mata Shimon, Agoyes Beis Yosef Ois Chav Gimel, brings more dayas to support this. Now what happens if it's a Matana Meruba, big Matana, But the guy who's promising it is a big gvir. So you know he's able to do it. It's not like when a regular person tells you he's going to give you a big matana, then you don't have some chadaita until you see it. Talking about a gvir adir, when he tells you he's going to give you a big thing, some chadaita, because he's able to fulfill his word. The erech hashulchan, yeah. If what? No, not the group of people. No, yeah, it's similar to the group of people, yeah, but he says over there, there's the Mari, brings from the Mari veil, Siman Chav Beis, that if it's a big gvir and he's able to fulfill his word, maybe by a matana meruba, the mekabel is also samcha daitay on it. And I don't remember who I saw, but there's a later Paisik who brings this as not as a maybe, but as a vaday, based on the Mari veil. It means the Erech HaShulchan understood the Mari veil as a maybe, and this guy understood the Mari veil as a vaday. I'm going to conclude with a few nekudas from the Piskei HaMishpat, the book I mentioned before, in Sif Ches, which brings a few interesting dinim. One is, what happens if I say I'm going to give a present to Pliny ben Pliny? A small present, but I don't do it in front of him. It means I'm here in Kaila and I say I'm going to give, I was talking with somebody and I say, I'm planning on giving this and this to Pliny ben Pliny. Is there mechus ramana if I change my mind or not? In other words, mechus ramana totally on the person hearing it, on smichus das or not? B'chayra, it's pretty clear from the Shulchan Aruch that it's mechus ramana, it's only because smichus das of the other person. But if you're going to say that the medin of mechus ramana is like the smeh, that it's mitzad, or like the Mukhi Yosef, there's more of an issur of you changing your mind, and the chayr it's asur. Taka is paskim one way, it's paskim the other way. He brings the afla in Ksubis Daf Nun Hey, who explains the shita of the Rosh, that he still is mechus ramana. The same thing in Betzeil HaChachma Chelik Hey Siman Kuf Samach, and in Minchas Pitim Siman Reish Mem Gimel Sif Beis, the way he's medayik from the Lashon of the Shulchan Aruch. But then he says, but the Machne Ephraim and Hilchis Schia Siman Chav Ches, and the Hafla himself, and the Shal Tzuvas Pri Yitzchak Chelik Aleph Siman and Aleph, they say no, there's no mechus ramana when the other person doesn't hear what you are saying when it comes to a matane. The Alter Rebbe, what's the lashon of the Alter Rebbe? It says Aymer L'Chaveri. It doesn't say that because some chadaita, he says very clearly. But it's not mitzan mechus ramana. He says Misha Beis Misha Amar L'Chaveri Shitnu Matana V'Lo Yinasana is mechus ramana. Why? B'matana Moed it says some chadaita Shemekal L'Kshivtichai. Mikol Mokaim B'Shah She'Omer Loi Litein Loi Tzarich Li is B'das Gemur V'Lo B'dat L'Shanis Kedover Echad Peh V'Echad Balei V'Asim Min HaTorah. Yeah, but that is Amar Loi. Next thing is the Betzel HaChachma that I just mentioned, Chelekei Siman Kuf Samach, is born in the Piskei Mishpat, says if somebody brags that he's going to give something in front of a bunch of people, he's going to give him a matana. Yeah, then he should not change his mind. Not that he's going to give him matana to Rabbim, but if he tells in front of Rabbim, part of his bragging is he's going to give something. Even if it's a matana meruba, you can't change your mind. What's the bragging in front of Rabbim? If you're there's a fabrengen and somebody's going on shlichus, and you show off that you're going to give a big donation. So stick to it. And the same thing he said. The same thing applies if you promised. If you promise somebody, you didn't say I'm going to give you. You promised with a haftacha, I'm going to give you this to a person. Whether it's b'fnei rabbim or not b'fnei rabbim, you have to, even matana meruba, you have to keep up to your word. Same Betzeil HaChachma, Chelekei Siman Kuf Samach, he was the brother of the Be'er Moshe. The brother of the Be'er Moshe. The next thing, the last one I'm going to say from the Piskei Mishpat, if somebody says he's going to give something, but why? Because he was harassed non-stop by the person asking for it. Whether it's for a donation, whether it's for a present, and he finally, to get him off his back, he tells him, okay, not, I'll give it to you. Then he brings from the Sefer Meishav B'Halacha, which is a Meishav B'Halacha is a Geshma cassette, if you want to get a hold of it. It's all the Shailas and Choshen Mishpat, 2 volumes which came to Machain Leira and Mansi. 2 volumes, Meishav B'Halacha, they were paskin by Rabbi Talber then. passed away already. And Siman Ayin Hey and Choshen Mishpat says there's no mechus salamon if you don't fulfill it. He says because the person who's expecting it from you knows that the only reason you said you're going to give it is because he got harassed. And he knows that there's no smichus das. He harassed you, he got a promise out of you, and he hopes that you're going to fulfill it. But not because the guy said he's going to give it. And with that we conclude Siman Reish Dalet.